everybody. This is Colette from the Ms. Behavior podcast. I work with my partner Kurt to do a podcast for people who do college student conduct for a living. And sometimes we do little tips and tricks here. And I've got one. Two things are going on for me right now. Kurt and I just returned from the Association of Student Conduct Administrators conference, where we got lots of interesting ideas and wheels turning. And today's a snow day from my university. So I'm at home thinking about best practices, as we all do. And I've been working on something this year that's been kind of fun, and I wanted to share it, and I had the time. Maybe, like you, one of my least favorite types of cases to be assigned is when we get a report of a student who is making a complaint about noisy neighbors. And they never seem fun. It never seems to resolve itself in a positive way. And this year, I'm trying something new. So first, let's talk about some of the common ways usually we deal with noise complaints in a student conduct office. One way is we force students into a conflict that they're not ready to manage yet. We tell them, you're an adult, you need to practice your conflict resolution skills, so you need to go talk to their neighbors. And maybe there's some nuance to that. Maybe they're given a chance to role play or practice, but I think a lot of times they're already feeling defeated and not supported. The second thing maybe that happens is they're just told, well, you should call the RA or whatever the equivalent of the student leader is in your area and have the RA deal with it for you. And that never feels right to me because we are educators. We are supposed to give students some practice resolving conflicts. Maybe not in the first way that I said, but it feels like there's a better way than having somebody else considered the authority instead of the student self-authoring. A third thing that might happen is it gets turned into a conduct case and a student has to sit down with an administrator and be told how their noise is impacting others and maybe there are ways to address the harm. And that maybe feels like an overplay, or again, it's just policing something from a hierarchical way of dealing with things instead of helping students resolve their own conflicts together. So this year, I'm taking a literal chapter from the student conduct book. I'm holding up the Reframing Campus Conflict book, which is probably my favorite in my whole career, student affairs book. And if you're looking for this book, which I highly recommend, it's edited by Jennifer Meyer-Schrage and Nancy Geis Giacomini, 5 out of 5. What the Reframing Campus Conflict book does is give you many different options for resolving conflicts, from ignoring it and doing nothing to soft interventions, conversation, dialogue, right up through very formal processes with hearings. And one of my favorite things that I see done so rarely is right in the middle, and that is called shuttle diplomacy. And that is where, instead of forcing students to sit down together before they're ready, you kind of become the intermediary between students who are having conflict. And I have found so many places where that has successfully led to the students coming together themselves. And so these noise cases, I've been experimenting with shuttle diplomacy. I'm just going to walk you through the process that's been working right now. We get a complaint, and for us, it's an incident report form from a student who basically says, I'm fed up. My neighbors are noisy. I've tried dealing with it. Sometimes the RA deals with it, but it's not getting better. They just get noisy again. I don't feel supported. The college isn't doing anything to support me. So I start out and I do an outreach to the student making the complaint, and I do it as gently and carefully as I can. I just try to lure them in with an invitation like, hey, I'm going to be the one that is dealing with your case, but first I'd like a few more details. And if I can get that student in the room, which I usually can, and often it's multiple students, then they tell me what's been going on. And then I pitched this idea to them of the shuttle diplomacy. My goal when I do this is a few things. One is to try to preserve the relationship between the students and the students that they have a problem with. Sometimes they have a friendship, sometimes they're on their way to being enemies or coalitions are building, but my goal is to have a relationship at the end. I do have a goal of them having some practice in their own development. So some of that is just finding a voice and explaining factually what's been going on and getting to the heart of what their concerns are. I have a goal of promoting empathy. And I'll show you how I do that. But I want students to be able to start to see things from each other's points of view. And I want them to build confidence. At its simplest, I want to promote student development and learning. So I sit down with the students, they tell me about the noise, and then I pitch this idea. I say, what I'd like to do, but I need your help. I think this is going to work for a long-term solution because I don't want to do anything that's going to lead to more conflict. So I want to do this carefully. What I'd like to do is reach out to your noisy neighbors and tell them I have had some complaints. They have some neighbors that are exasperated and they don't know what to do. But the neighbors have asked me, please do not get my neighbors in trouble. I want this to end, but I don't want to get them in trouble. And that's really important. And for some reason, this does a Jedi mind trick with these students who were ready to have their neighbors kicked out of school, moved, punished. Suddenly that empathy spark ignites for them where they're like, yeah, I don't want to get anyone in trouble. I don't want to get in trouble. Why would I want to do that to someone else? And so I ask for their permission to reach out. They usually want to be anonymous, which for me is fine at that point. And I let them know I'll report back. I'll be honest when I come back to report, and I'll let them know, do I think your neighbors are jerks and they're going to keep being noisy and we're going to have to go a different way? Or hopefully I can bring some good news that their neighbors were responsive. And I try to leave them pretty optimistic. And because I've had good luck with this, it's honest. I can say, usually this works. In fact, almost every time it works. So I go to the noisy neighbors and I have a pretty carefully crafted invitation that I email to them saying, you don't know me, but I work in community standards, but I'm actually on a peace building mission. And I even say that as the subject of my email. It's called Community Standards Peacemaking Mission. I tell them I've gotten some complaints from your neighbors, but I really am optimistic that we could work together as partners to find a way through this conflict where nobody has any community standards or student conduct action against them. But I really need their help and partnership. And could they meet with me? And I give them a link to my calendar so they can make an appointment. So once I get somebody from Team Noise together, again, I assert that their neighbors don't want them to get in trouble, but they're fed up. And I usually, with the complaining party, ask for a give, I call it. Like, is there something you can give me that I can say to the noisy people that just shows that you believe in their good intent? And usually there is something, even the smallest things like, yeah, my neighbors are nice. They helped us one time with this thing. Or in a case last week that I had, there was an entire rock band that lived together. They had a full drum set, amplified instruments, but they also, around the sides of their room, had tried to soundproof their bedroom. And unfortunately, the neighbors I was talking to were above and below them. And so I could say, like, they know that you've tried to soundproof and they really appreciate that. And they're wondering if there are some more things that could be done together. When I go in with the ask, that usually shows where people's hearts are. And I've got to say, the noisy people have risen to the challenge. Now, this is where these cases kind of diverge. There are lots of different ways that they resolve, but all of them have been positive. So in some cases, the neighbors just stopped the noise. I've had situations where they're like, we don't think we're being noisy. And I have been able to find delegates from the complaining group and delegates from the noisy group and got them together where they could go to each other's rooms and listen through the walls. But a lot of times they end up contacting me when I check in to say, Colette, I think things are good. And I got one last week that said, not only did the noise stop, you just wouldn't believe the relationship we have now with our neighbors. And now when the noise happens, we feel 100% confident just going over and talking to them. And that has been unbelievably rewarding, a little surprising even, based on how many decades I've done this work where it's been unsuccessful. So I am here as an ambassador for shuttle diplomacy, and I really recommend that you give things like this a try. This is just for noise, but I've also had success with complicated roommate conflicts, other group conflicts, where mediation is not the answer, and it's almost weaponized, where people are being forced into conversations. This helps bridge the way for those types of conversations. And I would love to hear from you if you use shuttle diplomacy now and have had success, or what types of cases I might be able to learn from you that you're doing. If you have questions, or if you're worried, if you have concerns about this, I would love to hear. Just write to us at misbehaviorcollege@gmail.com. And I hope you'll tune in to the Misbehavior podcast, which is available on Apple Podcasts, Amazon, anywhere you get your podcasts, you can find us. And we would love for you to join this conversation. Thanks so much, everybody, and good luck. Misbehavior is written and produced by Colette Shaw and Kurt Doan. Theme music was written and performed by Kevin MacLeod from incompetech.com. You can contact Ms. Behavior at misbehaviorcollege@gmail.com. That's msbehaviorcollege@gmail.com.